In 1609, the Spanish government appointed a new governor of New Mexico and ordered a new colony be established away from the native Indians. The new governor was Don Pedro de Peralta. The new colony was the present-day city of Santa Fe. Distance and isolation spelled poverty and hardship for the Santa Fe colonists. Spanish manufactured goods, clothing, metal tools, and other provisions arrived only every 3 or 4 years. The trail to Mexico City was hazardous, to say the least. The 6 months' journey often ended in the death of the travelers at the hands of nomadic Indians. The route became known as Jornada de Muerto, Journey of Death. But the Spanish had their reasons for settling the Rio Grande Valley.
During the 1540s, the Spanish had probed around the coast of California, and they had also probed into the southwest. And they considered the Rio Grande Valley as the best of the areas for their purposes, in that the Rio Grande Valley had a concentration of Indian peoples in pueblos, and those Indian peoples had, by Spanish standards, a relatively advanced culture. They had pottery, they had cotton cloth, and most importantly, they had a very productive horticulture that used irrigation water to raise corn and beans and squash. So the Pueblo people had the capacity to support a surplus population, and the Spanish meant to be that surplus population.
But this surplus population proved to be devastating to the native people, not only in terms of European disease, but in terms of the undermining of their native culture.
The arrival of the Europeans meant now that the Native Americans had the option of using European material objects, which meant in some ways, as it did in West Africa, the displacement of traditional objects of material culture. That why use a bow and arrow if you can have a musket? Why use a stone axe if you can have one made out of metal? Why use woven baskets and pots and clay pots when you can have metal pots, etc.? And so there is a sort of market revolution, if you like, in terms of the material culture of these indigenous people beginning in the 16th and 17th centuries.
The missionaries did not wish to bring hardship to the Indians, but they were willing to do whatever was necessary to convert them to Christianity, including punishing them.
Well, yes, because these people are heathens, and they stand, as the Muslims had stood in the case of the Spanish, outside the pale of religious sensibility. And so what you see here, in many ways, is a transference from Europe of many of the cultural and hostilities that had racked Europe since the time of the invasion of the Moors into Spain in the 8th century. The Court of the Holy Inquisition is not only aimed at the eradication of backsliding with the Jews and the Arabs in Spain, but also transported to the New World to police the religious beliefs of people here who have been converted to Christianity.
The Indians at first accepted the missionaries into their midst, thinking they possessed magical powers and could put an end to the diseases. But when the diseases continued, the Indians began to think of rebellion.
But often native peoples found this disappointing. The missionaries weren't able to stop the diseases. Native peoples continued to die even after they'd been baptized. So that some natives would say, it's baptism that's killing us. It's that sprinkling of the water on us that's killing us. And they would make this argument to their people. And they would say, if we're to live, we have to get rid of these missionaries.